Call this meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Just a reminder, when we're speaking, we do have two folks who are joining us virtually, so if you wouldn't mind turning on your microphone, I'm sure they would appreciate that. And otherwise, let's call this meeting to order. Any additions or deletions for tonight's agenda? And hearing none, could I get someone to move the agenda? So moved. Moved by Deputy Mayor, and we have a seconder.
Seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Foot. All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Hearing none, we have an agenda. The minutes of the previous meeting are in your package, so they were both online and in the print package that's here. Hopefully you all had a chance to peruse those. Are there any errors or omissions from those minutes that anyone's noticed? And if there are none, could I get someone to move the minutes as presented?
So moved.
And a seconder. Moved by Councillor Beer. And seconded by Councillor Foot, and we will accept those minutes as presented. No specific business arising or unfinished business, no correspondence this evening. So we'll get into new business, but just before we jump into the specifics of all of it, Kristen asked, do you have approximately how much time you need for the NPSCB commercial and industrial development provisions? Just to make sure.
So the commercial and industrial development provisions are just information pieces, and they kind of relate to item F4. They're for the public engagement.
How much?
And I don't know. We've talked about it a fair amount already. I'm going to say those two items, maybe 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So then we'll start with item F1. We'll make sure by we'll say 6:30 that we move on to the agenda. All right. And welcome, Mr. Moore. All right. So we're kicking it off with our NPS LUB implementation and administration segment. So if you look at the package and once again at the handouts, we've got a good sort of rubric to work with. But on this, Tom will always give you first option if you want to speak, and if not, Chris will throw it over to you.
You want me to go ahead, Tom? Okay, so good evening, everybody. Thanks for providing the time to the committee on such a beautiful evening. This workbook that we have is part 4 of the existing strategy, and it's our final workbook. So with the completion of our discussion on implementation administration, we have worked through clause by clause, section by section, sector by sector, our existing policies, our existing bylaw provisions. We've talked about what works, what doesn't, what we've missed, what we don't need. So I just want to flag for the committee, thank you for persevering through everything up to this point. And this really is kind of approaching the finish line on the detailed work that the committee has undertaken to prepare ourselves for drafting the new planning documents. So if you survive tonight and I were there, I would take you all out for a beer or a Coke or a bottle of water or whatever, and congratulate you in person. Part 4 is very much as it's titled. It's about implementing and administering all of the policies that are in parts 1, 2, and 3. So our introduction, the matters relating to provincial statements of interest and that type of thing, as well as our individual policy sets like residential policies, commercial policies, et cetera, et cetera. All of those are kind of standalone statements of intent combined with actual implementation that's in the bylaw. And part 4 kind of wraps them all together. Part 4 applies to all of sections or parts 1, 2, and 3 and applies to all sectors. It also focuses on our primary implementation tool, the land use bylaw, and the approaches for development control that the town has in place. So I think, Leslie, the only thing I didn't ask is, do I have sharing, like screen sharing? I'm just gonna pop up a few things, just more as visual reminders rather than actually anything that we need to dig into or anything that we will be digging into.
She's working on that.
Yep, I see here. So I'll start. Uh, so policy implementation one sets the table for there we go. Sharing's not turned on. Sets the table for our zones and the creation of generalized use future land use designations through the adoption of what is called a generalized future land use map. I think you are familiar with it. I mean, we've talked about it many, many times, but the generalized future land use map is kind of exactly what it says. It lays out a picture of the town. I'm just trying to pull it up right now and share it with you. Why can't I see it? Screen two, screen three. Oh my goodness. When we said we'd be done at 6:30, Will, I thought I'd be able to pull
Seven.
this all together. Just let me see what's, I don't understand why. I can see it on my screen. There it is. Thank you. Share. Okay. So this is at a small scale, so you could just see it as it appears in the document. I think, as I said, you're familiar with the concept, but I'm just going to go over quickly. The plan, the development plan for the town is based on a number of assumptions. One of them is that the town can and should be kind of divided into areas where in the future, similar types of land uses should be grouped. We have in the town identified basically three primary land uses. Residential, so these would be residential neighborhoods. And now this isn't a zoning map. This is just the general areas where residential development either is or should be. Commercial designation. So again, where commercial development is or should be, and industrial designations. So this is kind of a blueprint for the town at a high level. If all things being equal, development of a common character, residential, were to be located in a manner that minimizes land use conflict, maintains or promotes the general character of an area as either residential, commercial, or industrial, as well as the designations where specific policies for redevelopment of lots, different types of uses, and that type of thing can go. So policy IM1 identifies that the town will use the generalized future land use as the basis for the pattern of development within the town. And it also says very clearly that policy IM1 states very clearly that, and this is the existing strategy and the existing generalized future land use map from 2012, if an area beside another designation, and I'm just looking at the north end of the town, the pink is residential, the blue is commercial. Policy IM1 says that if the property just north of all of these blue lots were to be proposed to be used for commercial use as opposed to residential for blue use instead of pink, we would have to change this map. That these boundaries are kind of generally considered hard, we've considered and have a clear line. I'm just using again this as an example, adjacent to the Pines, but the residential boundaries between the commercial area and the residential area are deliberate and kind of fixed. So we need to change this map if we were to change that. So boundary location and the actual designation itself are both very important. As we've gone through the sections, different sectors, we have talked about boundaries. And I think I'm going to summarize that at this point, the committee has not identified any changes to the boundaries of the existing designations that are shown on this map. I think we've, maybe with the exception maybe of the Pines has come to the town and said, we have expansion plans. Now, the committee doesn't know what they are, the town doesn't know what they are, and we don't have any specific proposals. But the Pines now controls lands that are north of their previous land holding. But when we look at the industrial area, the marine industrial area, either at the wharf or at the Racket, if we look at the boundaries that kind of delineate commercial, downtown commercial from the adjacent residential neighborhood, and if we look at Victoria Street, and we've talked about it a couple of times, the distinction between the Victoria Street commercial designation on the east end, on its east end, adjacent to Warwick, and the downtown commercial area on its western boundary, again on Warwick. We haven't identified any, proposal or logic or support for connecting these, or conversely, limiting or reducing or shrinking any of these other designations. So that's what policy IM1 is about. And right now, I don't know that we've, with the exception of that discussion about the Pines, which we'll refine through our public engagement, we haven't really identified any changes to the boundaries. So adopting the three basic designations and identifying them on the map and identifying the boundaries for those designations is what policy IM1 is about. Policy IM2 basically does the same thing with respect to the land use bylaw and the zoning map. So it's a companion type of map, but the zoning map is attached and part of the land use bylaw, where the generalized future land use map is part of your strategy. And the zoning map is actually much more detailed. And again, I'll start just using the north end as an example, and actually reflects current activities and zoning allocation. So if you remember, this was pink and this was blue. But now when we look at the zoning map, we've got individual areas that are, say, public open space along the shore. We have areas where sewer is present, sewer and water. So we have urban residential development. And then we have residential development that's targeted for future growth and development. So we take that residential designation and then make it more specific and align the use and the activity on a lot with the specific permitted uses and structures of the zones. So the land use bylaw creates 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 zones. They are allocated across the town on a property by property basis according to the uses that are present. So policy IM2 basically talks about, IM2 talks about the bylaw, and it in turn creates the zoning map. The bylaw itself will apply zones, which it does, represented here. And it's kind of a fundamental component. The implementation is done by the land use bylaw, and the policy directions are contained in our planning strategy. So IM1, IM2 are pretty fundamental, and I don't see that it's actually the way Municipal Government Act sets up how to carry out regulations. You have to have a policy, and the policy is then implemented through the bylaw. IM3 is just a cue following up that statement that you have a policy and then you implement it through the bylaw. You can only put in your land use bylaw matters that are supported by policies. So policy IM3 basically says we're going to have development control provisions that ensure a high quality environment in all land use designations. IM3 also establishes that we will use general provisions generally across zones. So we don't need to say in policy, each individual zone will have these individual land use bylaw provisions. So we use a IM3 as a general enabling policy to say that, like we have in part 5 of our bylaw, general provisions for all zones instead of repeating them zone by zone. And it identifies, and we say it's going to include but not be limited to regulatory tools like lot standards, that would be frontage, area, setbacks, building heights, signage, landscaping, buffering, accessory buildings, parking, regulation of obnoxious use. So what IM3 represents is an enabling policy that allows us to include in the bylaw a very broad range of development control tools. And we use a general statement rather than having to repeat over and over and identify and itemize each of those tools in the policy. IM4, again, we're talking about administration here. The town administers the land use bylaw through a development officer. The development officer has to be approved by council. You can have more than one development officer. You can have a development officer and an assistant or an associate development officer. The development officer can also be responsible only for the land use bylaw or separately the subdivision bylaw and the subdivision regulations. So it's a legal requirement for the town to, once it has a bylaw in place, to approve and have an administrator for that. And in the context of planning, it's called the development officer. That function is called the development officer. These policies, IM1 through IM4 to this point, really just flow from requirements in the MGA. These are shalls, not may requirements, may have. So I would say that policy for the purpose of our review, policy IM4 needs to remain intact to be compliant with the Municipal Government Act. Policy IM5, I think we'll just acknowledge on its face when the strategy was adopted in 2012, the intention was to undertake a review no later than every 5 years. The town didn't do that. I think that's fair. Policies are only statements of intent. They do not bind council, although council cannot work and make decisions contrary to stated and approved policies, but it doesn't obligate council. I'll just note for you, and I think we've talked about it, the new minimum planning standards requirements have set mandatory plan review at 10 years, not 5. So I'm going to recommend that in the new documents, we just update and incorporate the 10-year requirement that the that the province has now implemented through the minimum planning standards. But the strategy does need to have an expression of intent with respect to a sunset clause. And I think we all understand that principle of good planning is that your document should reflect the situation in the town when they're adopted. They should be amended to reflect major changes, and that over time they need to be looked at for their currency, their relevance, and their administration. And that's really what the charge was to the planning committee in this process. Look at the plan. Right now it's 12 years old. We started when I was 10 years old. See what's working, see what's not working, identify what we're missing, and then draft new documents that will take us forward for the next 10 years. Policy IM6, I'm just going to make a quick reference to the ICSP is part of the current strategy, as we know. Our review work has not been part of what the committee was not charged with doing, was doing a review of the ICSP. So the ICSP will become a standalone document and will be the responsibility of council. It's a strategic document that was developed through some initiatives supported by the province to try to combine capital planning with sustainable principles for growth and development within the municipal purview, within municipal responsibilities. It's still a very relevant document, although it too, like the strategy, probably needs, and it does need, an update. The current requirements for minimum planning standards that the province has put in place in 2019 do not apply to integrated community sustainability plans. They only apply to municipal planning strategies and land use bylaws. So the town isn't under the same obligation, if you will, in terms of the ICSP, but it's a good tool. You are continuing to do your capital planning, your short, medium, and long range planning. And the ICSP kind of also hopes to look at broader community concerns beyond what you would typically find in the planning and development focus that are in our current planning documents. So I think with the ICSP being removed, I think we probably merit a policy saying that the previous strategy contained the ICSP. It's recognized as an important strategic document in the town and will be council's ongoing responsibility for maintaining it and reviewing it as council deems fit. I don't know, the alternative for this would be just to have a reference to the ICSP in our introduction portion of the strategy and then not worry about making reference to it anywhere else. So I think either of those approaches would be reasonable. So I don't know if the committee members have an opinion on that.
Or against that idea? Something entirely different.
I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Leslie.
Chris, will the current land use map be updated to reflect any changes that we've made in zoning since 2012 to now?
Yes, but some of them might be made redundant by what the new zoning
Okay.
requirements are. So just for the heck of it, we have medium density zone applied to lots 4, 2, 3, and 4 unit development. But if your new primary residential zone goes from 1 to 4 units, we're not going to keep an R2 R3, R4 designation on those lands because they will have been made legal and conforming by the structure of the new zoning. Did you follow me on that?
I did, yeah. I was really referring, I guess, kind of to a couple I thought of. One on Shore Road, for instance, that we did, well, actually, we did that by development agreement, so that's probably not a rezoning, but,
Right, exactly. Yep.
I think years ago, a rezoning. So, yeah, just a couple of them that I can think of, so.
So again, let me just, I think this is still up on the screen. Is it? Do I still have the zoning map? What I just wanted to do was highlight the table of contents here. Again, we have 3 primary residential zones: mixed use, medium density, and low density. I think we have talked, when we talked about the residential policy set, of keeping the mixed use zone. We've talked about revisions to our primary or our, let's call it our primary residential zone. And this low density would be 1 and 2 units. We would have 3 and 4. These 2 zones, just as an example, will be proposed to be consolidated into 1 zone because that's the scope of the permitted uses. And so where we see them here, this is a good example, I'm just pulling it out. RMU, RLD, that will become all the same zone. And so this map will be changed to reflect what the use on the property is relative to what the new zoning structure is.
Well, just to go to the deputy mayor first, and the CA.
Actually, you kind of answered some of my questions, but the question would be, is there any economies to be made in all those zones? But he's just spelled out a couple of locations that are there.
Tom?
So, just on the RMD zone, which is now up to 4 units, right? And we're even talking about going to the 8 units in that
Sure.
zone.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is, I think, was because some of our have 8 units or more that are RMD, but they're not actually conform, the non-conforming use.
That's exactly right. Yep, exactly.
I'm just
Now-
wondering whether we wanted an R&D zone to make those conforming units.
So that is a principles, and we'll talk about it because it's part of the policy set in terms of non-conforming structures. A principle of positive, good supportive planning is to try to ensure that through the adoption of the new bylaw, we don't create non-conforming uses. They have legal restrictions on them, development potential restrictions. More and more we see concerns with respect to insurance. And when a property owner has to confirm a land use bylaw status of their property, if you are in a situation where you are non-conforming, your insurance people will have to deal with you differently. And I don't know whether that necessarily means a higher premium, but you would be considered perhaps outside of the regular scope of risk. So it's a really good point, Tom, and it's one of the things that we will do deliberately in structuring the permitted uses of the zones. We will work to ensure that we're not creating new non-conforming uses within certain designations. Like in some areas, if you've got a commercial use right smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and you want to have a very clear statement that says that should be residential in the long run, then that's a situation where you may consider making the commercial use non-conforming, because the intent is to clearly indicate the long-term appropriate use of the property. So, good point, and we'll talk about it further. I was just looking ahead to see its policy IM9, where we'll speak about non-conforming uses. So the zoning map will be updated, and it'll be updated in line with the approach that we take with respect to the structures of our zones and what we see on the ground in terms of current land use. We were on IM6. I was just really quickly saying one of two options for us. We could still include a reference to the ICSP in our implementation policy, or we could basically kind of clear the decks through the introduction section of the strategy and say, recognize that it was formerly part of the town's planning documents, and it's now a standalone document and the responsibility of council to administer. We could go either way.
Comments, questions? Yep, everyone's pretty quiet tonight. We'll go with your recommendation and go on from there.
Okay, yeah, maybe the simple thing would be to include it in our introductory comments about the strategy and not need to make reference to it again.
Okay, that sounds fair, and it helps make it a little bit more concise.
Yep.
Couple nods from the room, so I think you're good. Or no, I think Mr. Moore fell asleep.
Okay. Policy IM7.
Sorry, question from the deputy mayor, if we can stop.
Yep.
I'm wondering, just to try to help out commercial downtown. Is there any combination or change in definition that we could apply to commercial general and commercial downtown to make that more conformist?
Could you just describe that a little more? What do you mean by conformist? So here I'm just pulling kind of the primary areas of downtown and Victoria Street here. What do you mean by conformist?
Well, what's the big difference between commercial downtown and commercial general?
So right now, it's primarily the lot and zone standard. It's not the uses, other than say residential. No, right now they're dealt with actually similarly. You can have standalone residential in either by development agreement, and in each of the zone they're treated a little different. But in terms of the scope of uses, retail, wholesale, personal service, restaurants, entertainment, accommodation, they're permitted in both of them. But the zone standards for downtown, and I'm just going to zoom in. If you look at the historic subdivision pattern and the lot pattern, downtown is full of a lot of tiny lots that have basically been built and occupied 100% by buildings, because that's the way built form was. Victoria Street has been subdivided differently at a different period in time and laid out more for vehicular access, larger lots, surface parking. On Victoria Street, they tend to have narrower frontage than they do depth, but still it's quite different than what we see downtown. So the range of uses is pretty much the same, but the setbacks and the requirements that are tied to the character of the lot are the difference between them.
I guess where I'm coming from is talking about the Airbnb loophole. Is to close that loophole in both of this.
Right, okay, so I think we were very clear that residential use at the street frontage in the downtown was identified as a problem and would be regulated. What we've said right now in the general commercial area is that any residential use needs to be set back from the street. We don't have provisions for requiring at-grade street frontage residential for existing lots, but for new residential development in the general commercial, you need to be set back so that redevelopment for commercial activities still has an opportunity to take place. We had that discussion fairly extensively when we looked at the proposed development agreement about 3 years ago. And in fact, the buildings ended up being required to be at the rear. And the response from the proponent was a third, perhaps third phase, third building after the two primary residential structures. And it being a mixed use with commercial at grade and perhaps commercial or residential at the second and third story. So that's really the primary difference. Looking at those buildings and those uses along Victoria Street, I don't know that we run the same risk as we do with some of the more traditional commercial structures that we have downtown. But we could harmonize those so that they would be the same in terms of prohibiting short-term rental at the street. We can't prohibit it as a use overall because we've got accommodation as a permitted use in both of these zones. So finding that balance on how to maintain the integrity of your street frontage, I think we could use the same approach, but that's really why they're different, is because the subdivision pattern and the development pattern between those two areas is different, but we've been supportive of a common scope of commercial activity between the two. Does that make sense?
Proceed to item 7.
Okay, great. So again, when we're talking implementation, part of what happens through the land use bylaw is we've identified applications that could be considered for rezoning or changes. Policy IM7 lays out how we go about that and what we consider. So if you're going to rezone or enter into a development agreement, and the committee would be familiar with this is kind of the process that we go through when we have an application. We look at the criteria, we comment, we make observations, we get information from Public Works or Emergency Services, and that kind of stuff on the adequacy or the appropriateness of a particular proposal. IM7 sets out the criteria. Well, IM7 and IM8 sets out the criteria that we use when we go through that process. So I don't know that the community always appreciates this, but the MGA requires us to predetermine, identify, and publicly establish what our evaluative criteria are. Those evaluative criteria have to be consistent with the powers that are enabled through the MGA. A lot of people, maybe not a lot, but I've heard people say, well, you guys just make decisions on whether you like somebody or don't like somebody, or how you feel that day, or what you think of, I don't know, the style of buildings that they develop. But that's not true, actually. All of our evaluative criteria are established in policy, and they are what we must use to govern at the committee level our recommendations, and at council's levels the decision making. If we go beyond what we've identified in our policy, we're very subject to overturn through the UARB, because the test that the UARB uses is whether council's decisions are reasonable to implement the intent and policy of the strategy. We're going through those questions right now on an application, and the board hasn't provided any direction yet or rendered any decision, made any comment. But that is the test that the town is held to if a decision making process is questioned. So IM7 identifies what council shall consider, and by implication, what the PAC needs to consider in making recommendations to council on applications to rezone or applications to enter into a development agreement for whatever the proposal should be. So we do need to go through these, so sorry about this, but IM7A sub 1 requires council to consider whether the proposal is appropriate in terms of the adequacy of sewer and water services. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. We have a companion policy that says all development in the town must be serviced with sewer and water, or tied to the public sewer and water infrastructure. So something might not be appropriate if, say, approving a development required the town to make an addition to the sewage treatment plant. Like if that were an A plus B equals C, this application, you say yes, we need then to increase our wastewater treatment capacity. The town would be within its rights to say, no, that's not an appropriate application. It's not timely because we haven't got a plan for an expansion to the treatment plant. We don't have the money for a plan for the expansion. And we don't support the idea that the general tax rate would have to assume the financial burden of facilitating development on a private lot. So that's kind of the logic in A1. The adequacy of school facilities, again, perhaps a little less lineal in terms of calculating impact, but certainly the town would not want to be promoting significant new residential development that was targeted at families with school-age kids if we knew that our community infrastructure, including schools, were not capable of accommodating those kids. The provision of school services and the infrastructure building, those are provincial responsibility, but the municipalities all make contributions to support those services. So there is a tie back to the town, even though we don't have direct frontline responsibility for providing school buildings, school sites, school programming. Those are provincial jurisdictions. Adequacy of fire protection. This is a municipal service, and there may be hard and fast limitations within an emergency response or fire service capacity if they have, I don't know, equipment challenges, staffing challenges, logistical challenges, perhaps not in the town, but certainly here in the city. The distribution of fire stations throughout the municipality is a big concern, and a lot of times when you're looking at development proposals, what we will get from the emergency services is a response time radius around the actual fire stations. And at some point, a large development that might be out of a response time that is deemed unacceptable. So you put a big subdivision there and it's going to take us 36 minutes for our first response to get there. That could be a reason to say, no, it's not an appropriate location. This is not an appropriate or timely proposal. Or conversely, we're going to go forward with this 6,000 unit subdivision or whatever it is, and it's going to compel us to need a fire station there. Do we have the capacity? Do we have the strategic plan and the ability in our fire service to create a new fire hall and address the concerns in terms of a response time and coverage? So fire protection is an important issue. And perhaps in larger municipalities, more critical than, say, the town. The town's fairly compact, and we've got a very well-established and regarded fire service. Impact on adjacent uses is another consideration that council needs to make. I will say, and you probably heard me say it, a residential use beside a residential use, to me, there is, maybe not in 100% of the time, but there's a degree of compatibility between residential activity, even though you may see it in a different form, compatibility in terms of the services that it needs, what it provides the community, the amount of land in the community that's needed for those different types of uses. So what we're not talking about is impact on a neighbor. You're blocking my view. I have to move my shed. Whatever. What we're talking about is compatibility at the use. So some people interpret that different, and that's been the cause of many questions that have gone to the UARB. In general, similar uses tend to be compatible. Dissimilar uses, so you'd have a much more focused conversation of commercial use beside a residential use. And that's why those boundaries between commercial and residential designations are pretty important to be aware of. Those, from my perspective and my experience, are the types of issues that council should be looking at when we're talking about the impact of one use on an adjacent use. If you've got any comments as we go through these, please. When we're talking about redevelopment, when we're talking about development agreements and rezoning, traffic is always something that seems to come up. So the adequacy of the road network within, adjacent to, and leading to the development is, again, always a concern from the community and always a concern from the town in terms of a public service level. The town, sorry, yeah.
Just make this question because I know could possibly open up a can of worms, but 9-7 seems to me to be the place that, I know we don't have a Coastal Protection Act, I know we don't have a lot of terms and definitions defined when it comes to the minutia of that, but I think as we learn as human beings in developing, it's now not a question of how the environment will be affected by the development, but how the development should be affecting the environment. So is this the place where we should have that discussion to if we are going to consider those factors?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's a really good point. And in fairness, when we did go through the environmental policy set, we were clear that, going back to 2012, there wasn't really I don't know, maybe a larger public concern or awareness or desire on the part of the town to put its, to step into that regulatory framework, with the province doing coastal zone protection discussion and their initial legislative agenda that was then changed and then put back to the municipalities. For sure, we should be in cross-referencing and incorporating in IM7 the I would say at least the basic coastal zone protection relating to sea level rise and the risk of storm surge that we talked about at our last meeting. So a reference to the provincial map, I think, would be important because it actually classifies levels of risk, if you remember, either existing and then at a 50-year point and a 100-year point, depending on what the assumptions for sea level rise over that time period were. So we should absolutely incorporate it here.
So wouldn't it be appropriate then to stick in there after E another clause saying the effect the development will have on the environment?
Yes. Yep.
It's an end.
All right, yeah, that's, would that be the will of the committee to do that? So to add, I guess there's an F that's already under there, so a G after that. Guess we give direction to come up with, well, whatever we need to enter in there and discuss it at our next meeting.
I guess, yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think F says any other.
Oh, okay, so we
Yeah.
can,
Yeah. So I think the judge would appreciate that. That's kind of one of those catch-all that the MGA and the province have accepted over time to give council some flexibility. I don't think you really want to rely on that for something that is as clear and that we have, good resources for. I don't think you'd want to rely on F to bring in our sea level implications for sea level rise and the implication of development on the environment. They're clear, they're standalone. You'll have other policy to cross-reference.
G to not necessarily use it as a catch-all for that, but just
Right.
to that to G, make F the.
Yeah, so maybe a new F that deals with the sea level rise discussion that we had, and that the current F becomes G.
Wouldn't it
Yeah.
cover just generally the impact on the environment? You don't need to cover sea level. There may be other impacts on the environment than sea level.
I would say that sea level and storm surge are the two that we discussed at length at our last meeting. They're the two that the province has provided us really good technical resources for, and actually have made kind of put their mark in the sand in terms of identification for risk over time. Like I think the province, even though they didn't implement those regs themselves, I think they went a long way to making it possible for the town to, with respect to broader impacts on the environment, if you can identify any that are tangible and measurable. I think that's the two real challenges when we move into it. We could certainly incorporate them. So Charles, did you have anything specific in mind?
No, somebody wanted to put a steam-fired power generation plant in town, burning hardwood. Time when we're interested in it. But I mean, there could be other environmental issues. That's my only point. I think, apropos of what Mr. Saunier said, if if a development is thought to have some impact on the environment for any reason.
Like a wood doctor?
Well, it wasn't, but,
We talked about that.
yeah. Doctor.
So I'd be happy to receive any kind of suggestions. Again, my only comment would be that the issue should have identifiable, measurable means of evaluation. So these are criteria the council shall consider. And then just for the heck of it, like let's say the impact of a development on the clam flats. I've just thrown that out there. Say development in the south end, and I know that there's clam harvesting there, and then again maybe in the Racket, in the north end. We would need to identify what measures, what indicators the town would use to assess whether there's an impact and whether it's acceptable or unacceptable. So it might be mortality of a clam bed or productivity of a clam bed or something like that, which is fine. But then we would be requiring a proponent both to be able to demonstrate it and the town to have a clear understanding of what the measurements mean and being able to identify from the town's perspective where it moved from acceptable to unacceptable. So I think the point is really well made. I just would encourage us to talk about those matters which we can quantify and delineate in terms of that threshold between acceptable and not acceptable.
Thinking, Mr. Chairman, years ago, we had a fish meal plant in town. Under what do we cover that?
Maybe that's where other comes in.
As an odoriferous.
I would, to go back to Chris's point earlier, the province does specifically mention, sea level and that other thing. So it probably is beneficial for us to make sure that we're mentioning the same things within our, MPS and MPP. So it does make sense to have those ones specifically in there. And I'd say for the committee, if there are specific examples we can think of, we can always add those in something, FGHI, JK, this as long as is required. But with that, more specific example we can put in there.
So I'll throw out some municipalities use language that kind of says a use is not obnoxious by means of emission, byproduct, noise, vibration, et cetera, et cetera. So they try to identify characteristics of an activity that would make that activity unacceptable. So that might be one approach.
We have that language in ours, do we not? Maybe not in the strategy, but I know.
In the bylaw we do. We would need it properly in the strategy, I think, Tom.
So if we can find that possibly and just use the same language, you copy it and put it in there as well. That would make sense.
Yep.
As if it's candy worms.
Yeah, that you did.
And I appreciate kind of, I know we hear this from the community sometimes, and I appreciate the committee would like to be as robust, have as robust an approach to evaluation as we can. The flip side of that is there's an obligation on us to be able to measure it and be able to assess it so we can make a recommendation, or council do the same thing when they talk about it. So the further away from, again, demonstrable impact on the productivity of a clam bed, the further away we go from that to just no impact on the fishery, for example, the latter is really a more difficult one to kind of put your head around. So if you were serious about it, we would want to narrow down our assessment and our criteria to things that we can measure. So we were talking about road networks. Again, traffic being kind of a no-brainer. A lot of people are worried about it. And the other good thing with that is there are engineering models to forecast traffic volumes, traffic flows, directions, patterns, and it is a science. So where we have that as a criteria, there is an industry and a body of knowledge that's defensible that you can rely on to assist you when you are looking at that as an evaluative criteria. So that's sub 4, sub 5. Again, I've talked about it earlier, but the town really needs to, or has the obligation to all taxpayers to say whether or not a proposal has the risk of creating financial impact on the town. Now, it may, and the town may be prepared to accept it, but perhaps not. So it's an important criteria there. IM 7B talks again about circulation. Right now, we don't have rail. This is kind of more a historic reference, but cars and pedestrian traffic, if something were jumping out, and well, I'll use a good example. The Victoria Street crosswalk proposed in conjunction with the development agreement in the vicinity of the school. So those, the school, the nature of the development, traffic movements, the need for sidewalks or where sidewalks were present, really brought the discussion and the evaluation to saying, if we don't have a crosswalk, this development might be considered premature. And so it's a good example of where this type of criteria was brought into the evaluation. Sub C speaks to being able to assess the development relative to the lot, shape, dimension, setbacks, and that type of thing. So to me, that's a logical. You may have a great idea that seems to fit in generally a great location, but just not well with the property that the proponent actually owns. And that actually happens a lot. Compatibility, again, with existing patterns of development and adjacent uses. We've got, let's use that fish plant or that fish meal suggestion. It might be, maybe, I don't know, maybe the footprint's too small, but if we had a large marine industrial area, fish plants might be great there. If it were on the edge of a marine industrial area and close to residential development, maybe it might not be appropriate there. So the use itself and the zone might actually take a back seat to the specific location and its implications for impact on adjacent uses going from industrial to residential. Sub E talks about, and this is to the point that the committee made earlier, the suitability of the site and the impact of the site on the development rather than the impact of the development on the adjacent environment. So this is one direction, and we've talked about the other direction. But clearly, the town doesn't want to promote development in locations where you have known environmental conditions that will create challenges either for the developer or for the town afterwards and the residents of that development. And generally soils, steepness, grades, and hydrological features like rivers and wetlands and an area's susceptibility of flooding are pretty typical criteria that we would look at. So if we add after sub E, a new provision relating to coastal protection, sea level and storm surge concerns linking back to the provincial work. If we have something specific on a broader environmental impact on environmental considerations and the idea of introducing obnoxious uses, I think we go E, F, G, H, and then keep our general provisions. The general catch-all relating to other matters required by policies in the strategy. So IM 7, I think it should be brought forward. I'd be happy to draft additional provisions relating to those three matters. And it is the criteria that we will use both at the committee and that council is obliged to use when we're looking at actual applications for development through discretionary approvals like rezoning and development agreements. Policy IM 8 is a specific policy relating to wind turbines and standalone or freestanding solar panel arrays. We haven't had any of those applications come forward for approval. I think it's a good policy to have in place, though. So I'd suggest we continue maintaining policy IM 8. The only thing that I'll note is that the province has recently, in March 2025, issued again a province-wide directive. I don't know whether it was circulated to council. It was circulated, I think it was, to all municipalities. The province has reduced the threshold if a municipality uses noise generation as a regulatory tool. The province has required it to be lowered to 40 decibels. 45 was kind of the best practice from the industry perspective, but the province is looking at encouraging wind energy development and trying to remove municipal regulations that would represent barriers to wind energy development. The province has set the maximum setback that a municipality can require at 4 times the turbine height. Various municipalities used noise or distance from a dwelling, and some of them, well, previously the municipality of Digby used 1 kilometer. And so it would, at that point again, was considered kind of a best practice and kind of a balance between industry interests and community interests. But the province has deemed that it could be excessive and have required municipalities to adopt setbacks relative to the height of the turbine. And the municipality doesn't have any flexibility here.
Mr. Chairman, I can't resist asking, why would we need anything in here about wind turbines? No possibility ever wind turbine being built in town. Is there? Small ones.
Yeah, and it is a possibility. I know at one point in time, the Pines actually looked at the idea of having turbines put in behind on the back of their property. So I guess that could technically fall within the scope of town.
We've actually had some commercial interests also talk about turbines at the top of the hill. The radio station, I think, was interested at one point, or a proponent interested in the radio station property. But it's a good question. I think generally, Charles, I think small and medium scale wind energy generation has kind of fallen by the wayside. I think there was hopes for it at one point with technology and whatnot, but the market just hasn't been able to come to reconcile the cost relative to the benefit on that smaller scale. So I think it's a legit question. I guarantee you that you take it out, someone's gonna come up with an application.
Yeah.
And Tom, did we ever talk about maybe the town entertaining wind turbines on the public works property by the reservoirs?
No.
Not that you remember? No.
We've got the only wind turbines not in town. Would be up at the lake.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But then that's a lake, but not within town. Not of any size, that's for sure. I would think that we would probably looking at solar before we looked at wind.
So maybe I might put to the committee following Charles's suggestion of, or a question on why we even have it. My then follow-up would be, if you don't have a regulation, do you still want to allow it to happen unregulated? The implication being if you don't have a good means of regulating it, then you might want to prohibit it.
So you've got I guess you do have the smaller turbines that individuals, they go to Home Hardware or Canadian Tire and buy those small ones, right, to a certain extent. And we had one or two of those in town already, right? So it's just a way to try to keep them. I mean, if everybody's thinking about the big turbines that are down in Mackinac up on Van Tassel Lake, we're not talking about those, but there are ones that you can attach to building roofs and things like that, or smaller turbine, but
Like the one in Gilbert's Cove there, Sonny has a side road.
Never worked.
Is it cool?
yeah, it's
Oh, I'm
gone.
down there.
Well, the provision does have solar in there,
Yeah,
so you learn, I never knew anybody had a small thing.
It's very important we keep the decibels on that solar below 45.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't. It's just a joke with solar power, maybe.
I'll just say that where a development agreement or where solar arrays are typically regulated is giving consideration to development potential of the adjacent properties, because once that array is in place, there'll be heck to pay if you haven't considered development on the property next door and someone goes ahead and then has an impact on the solar potential of the investment that's already been made next door. So typically that's what the focus is, not on the panel or the array itself, but its location relative to development potential adjacent to it and the relationship between the two.
I think we'd have more problem with trees than that.
Well, so that's a really good comment. Typically, most solar proponents are going to come in with either a vacant without any trees or propose to remove trees to promote their development. So that actually raises concerns in a lot of places, as well as what the proponent's got to do to the property to make it suitable for use as a solar array. My suggestion, if we think IM8 isn't relevant or redundant, then I think we just need to clean up the bylaw and confirm whether or not and in what circumstances the wind turbine and the solar arrays would be permitted as of use, as of right. We don't have to do it. You could do away with them. You might not want to, but we do need to provide some type of structure for regulating them if they're going to be permitted. And if it's not the development agreement, that's fine.
Chair, some of that anyway, most of this really, I mean, most is gonna be adjusted as we go, I would imagine, in some of those policies. You're not gonna get it all right at first anyways.
No, no,
So,
you're
as
right.
long as we have something in there that's around that, I believe we're going forward.
Once again, everyone's been quiet. Deputy Mayor?
Technology is changing. Your definition of a windmill today may not be the same tomorrow, because now they're experimenting with very, very tall, very, very skinny turbines that actually look like a water cycle. You know what I mean? And they catch more wind.
Yeah.
The technology changes all the time.
Yeah, there's paint, there's all that stuff.
Animals on our streets.
No, sir. All right, CAO's view is that we should retain it, and it might make sense to have some, but it does make sense to have something that's there in the event that technology changes and someone comes and says, hey, I want to put this in. And I'd say specific to the noise, maximum output that's there. I think that's important considering the majority of the town is residential. Oh, Councilor Flood.
Agreed, because what we're doing is we're, in this policy, it's the intention to give consideration. And at that time, we'll get the details on.
Yeah.
We think what's gonna happen, wind turbine.
Correct.
Or, solar power, whatever. So if we leave it in there and something pops up, we have this to refer to. That it was our intention to give consideration to it. And we can make a decision at that time.
Thank you, Councilor. Go ahead, Chris.
I think that's a great point. And again, like I said earlier, policies enable council, but they don't compel them. But if you don't have them, you're kind of flopping out in the wind when you're doing decision making. Okay, policy IM9, we talked about it briefly. No, sorry, IM9 is about variance. IM10. IM9 is variance. The only thing that I'll say, so variance is the ability that the development officer has to cut people slack, so to speak, to look at site-specific individual applications and vary the standards that are required by the bylaw. It's upon application, so it's not a standard process. The MGA provides 4 primary areas where the development officer can provide variance. I'm just gonna, and again, because this goes directly from the MGA. No, that's not what I wanted. All right, thought I had the MGA here. There are provisions in the MGA that, in addition to these 4 primary development control requirements that variance can be applied to, parking spaces, ground area and height of a structure, floors occupied by home-based business, and the area and height of a sign. The province allows us to have variance. I'm just gonna try to, so bear with me, sorry about this. I must have closed the tab. Nova Scotia Municipal Government Act, here it is. Part. I'm just gonna run by them and I'm gonna recommend that the flexibility that the MGA provides us in variance. I'm gonna suggest that the town take advantage of the full scope of the matters that a development officer can consider on application. Right now, the town utilizes only the primary ones, and I'm going to try to share a different screen. Can you see, do you see text here from the Municipal Government Act?
See it, can't really read it. I can see it.
Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna, it's really straightforward, but I just would like to show. So variance is in part or section 235 of the MGA, and you'll see that our current strategy takes advantage of provision A, B, and this section has been revised since 2012 to be written differently than our current bylaw allows. So we will need to revise IM 9 to reflect the enabling provisions. Where the strategy also provides for, we have parking spaces, heights, home-based businesses, and signage. Where variance can't be granted is where the variance violates the intent of the bylaw overall. Can't vary anything from something to 0, for example. We have a premise that we need setbacks for whatever rationale, but going from some to none is generally inconsistent, thought to be inconsistent with the intent. If you want a variance and everybody else is going to ask for one, then generally that's not where variances are used. And if you've gone ahead and without a permit and then you've done something and you need a variance to kind of get out from the mess you've made, that's not an intended use of a variance either. So policy IM 9, I'm suggesting we make consistent with sections 235.1, 235.2, and 235.3 of the MGA. It's providing the town the greatest range of options on granting a variance. This doesn't come to the committee very often, or it doesn't come to the committee at all. It's actually a development officer process. So it's more enabling provisions for the development officer. I am going to recommend that, similar to variance, I'm at section 238 of the MGA, that we adopt the existing full MGA provisions relating to non-conforming structures or uses, non-conforming structures for residential uses in particular, the regulations of non-conforming uses in 240 with respect to their change or extension or redevelopment. And in section, and I'm going to recommend that we adopt provisions in section 242, which provides for relaxations on restrictions for non-conforming uses that are contained in those previous sections, so that the development officer can use discretion and provide flexibility for non-conforming uses where we're talking about the extension of non-conforming use on a lot, for the enlargement, alteration, or reconstruction of a structure, for structures containing uses after destruction. Used to be that you could, after 75% of the value of the building, you couldn't recommence a non-conforming use. That has been changed. It used to be that if you stopped a non-conforming use for more than 6 months, that was it. But the MGA has been changed to provide greater flexibility. And it used to be that you couldn't change one non-conforming use to another. But where the strategy provides, the development officer now has a greater range of flexibility in dealing with non-conforming uses. So it kind of goes back to that conversation we had earlier. We don't want to create non-conforming uses. They are regulated through the MGA, not directly through policy. But where we do have policies, the town can take advantage of more flexibility or provisions for relaxation on regulations than we have in our current strategy and bylaw. So I'd like to propose that as a companion to policy IM 9, we insert a new IM 10 with respect to the non-conforming use provisions in the MGA, including the additional relaxation options in section 242. And again, it's not something that typically lands in the committee's lap because it's really an administrative tool that the development officer uses through bylaw administration.
Okay, I believe the CAO had a question.
I think about, excuse me, I think I found the answer. Is it the section 235 on variances, that is included in
IM 9, yeah.
9, plus we got those other things, so.
Yeah, so variance is different than non-conforming use though. So again, the provisions that we have in IM 9, we want to update the reference to section 235(1) because the province has updated those. We already have the additional scope of variance that's in 235(2). And then clearly, to qualify, you have to make sure you're not offside on any of the provisions in 235(3). The non-conforming use provisions that are set out between sections 238 through 242 should be similarly referenced in the policy so that the town has all of the options that are enabled through the MGA, and they're primarily to provide flexibility and to counteract some of the very kind of restricted provisions that the Act actually has in relation to non-conforming uses. So it's a benefit to property owners. It's a tool for the development officer, and it provides the town enhanced flexibility in light of the fact that non-conforming uses and structures are regulated by the province through the MGA directly and not necessarily by the town. We don't have the ability to dictate what we define. We can't define what a non-conforming use is. We cannot define what a non-conforming structure is. Those regulations go from one end of the province to the other and are set by the province, but the province gives us the ability to introduce, they use the word relaxation, but flexibility, provided we include reference to that in the strategy. So that's really all I'm saying.
All right, thank you, Chris. It is 7:30 now, or 7:31. So we're going to, I guess, put a pin in that for now. So we've discussed IM 9 and go ahead.
Well, should we just make that amendment that Chris is recommending, or we?
Oh, for IM 9 and IM 10?
Yeah, because I think we should update it with what he just recommended, and then we stop there.
Yeah, I think
I'm
that's,
making notes in the draft that he does, that'll be the draft that's coming back to.
yeah, that'll come back to us and then we'll do that after.
He's
We'll
making
go ahead.
those notes and then his draft, and then he does it, he'll be adding all that stuff.
Yeah, for the committee's in agreement with it, then we'll add that to, so see some nods, so, Councillor Weir.
Thank you, Chair. There's only IM 11 and IM 12 left. That's quick. We can get there.
Yeah, so, and I was just gonna chirp in and say they are completely administrative. So the town regulates subdivision, and IM 10 provides you a planning policy that supports your subdivision bylaw. You have a subdivision bylaw, the development officer administers it, so it is really simply an enabling policy. IM 11 is a fairly clear statement that you need to subdivide on public roads. You do not promote or allow the development of private roads in the town. Again, those two go together. Your subdivision bylaw actually prohibits private roads, but the municipal planning strategy supports that intent. IM 12, and I'm sorry, Will, is just giving you the ability to recover fees from applicants relating to various application processes where the processes require notification of to property owners or the publication of notices and administrative fees. It doesn't say what these fees are or what applications they apply to. It is an enabling provision through your administration that says when someone comes in, you can set a fee for a development agreement application, and when you have to put an ad in the paper, you can recover those costs. Or when you need to notify adjacent property owners through registered mail and that kind of stuff. It's really just a means of the town through the MGA, because these are fee recoveries that you're enabled by the MGA to cover planning related applications. So sorry to sneak that in, but I don't think they're controversial, and they're very straightforward, and they're more enabling. They're not obliging you to do anything.
That's quite all right. It took 3 minutes. That's good. All right. Any questions on any of IM 10, 11, or 12 for Chris before I move on to commercial and industrial development provisions? And here you go. Those who have the PDF up, it's on page 11. So that's Digby Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw, Commercial Industrial Development Provisions. So this is what we've been all over the past number of meetings. And Chris, Tom, I'm going to say probably Chris, we'll let you take it away from there.
Yep. So just really quickly, we're looking at the provisions or the preparation for the public engagement meeting. Talking with Tom and looking at our schedule, what we're proposing is that it occur on October 23rd, which is we have scheduled for our next PAC meeting. The 2 weeks before the meeting, we will update the plan review website to circulate the same type of documents that we provided the community to assist them in preparing for the residential roundtables. So this is the draft of the Planning for Growth, Charting Our Future document it's dated October 25. It isn't public yet. Just to refresh you, we provide some background. We talk about the legislative powers. We talk about the strategy. And then we provide a brief overview of the current commercial and industrial development objectives and the policy overview. The strategy and bylaw are linked on the website so you can see them. And the final page on this draft document, and the format is similar, the content for the most part is similar. It's about encouraging people to participate in the roundtable and conveying the sentiment that your voice matters. In this instance, again, we have thought-provoking questions or issues relating to commercial and industrial development, whereas previously we had to residential development. Kind of an icebreaker, soliciting input on how people think the town's commercial areas have changed over the past decade. Do we have sufficient area for commercial development or industrial development? How could the town promote and attract new commercial and industrial activity? And this is primarily in the context of land use. Where we have new commercial and industrial interest, where should it go? Going back to our generalized future land use designation discussion. And what types of issues do people feel our commercial and industrial development face? What's important? In this instance, I'm asking, or we're proposing to ask in the context of the downtown, but we could put a companion policy for uptown commercial for Victoria Street. Are there questions about uses, character of buildings, access, circulation, parking, traffic? These would all be matters that I think at the round table we would want to use to promote discussion. And the final kind of the summary is, the committee's looking for input to assist us in our work, and would encourage everybody to come out and participate. We provide, like we did previously, an opportunity for people to RSVP, and then following the roundtable, we provide people an opportunity through the email, through the website, to provide us comments that we didn't capture, or additional comments. So that's really kind of what we're doing. At our last meeting, we talked about the committee members doing facilitation in discussion with Tom and the staff. I think the only other thing that I wanted to point out here was that because we're talking about commercial and development activity and hoping that our commercial community, our commercial operators, our business owners and operators will be able to attend, we're proposing to do only one session rather than an afternoon and an evening, thinking that the afternoon would be a bit of a challenge, might be a challenge for a number of the business operators. Having that session take place in the evening and doing just one. So that's kind of an update on where we are with the preparation of the documentation. You've got this piece. These 2 pages are in your agenda documentation, as is an excerpt or a summary of the existing commercial policy set. And we did that exact same thing for the residential policy set. So the information for the community will basically be the same, formatted the same, provided ahead of time, and the committee will be the roundtable facilitators. And that's those 2 items.
Mr. CDA.
So I guess for the public engagement thing on commercial, the head suggested that about the PAC members all being facilitators at this, so we want to be able to confirm that. At the residential, which is actually, it's very costly to hire facilitators, and we can do it in-house. Commercial is a little bit different than residential. The residential is a lot more complex, and there's a lot more controversy, I guess, around residential policies and development, and then commercial, as you can see by the large group that we have here tonight in the audience. So, yes, I think for us to continue with the plan, that, get to know whether the members of the committee are good with being facilitators.
All right, we'll go around, just to confirm, Mr. Mayor,
Good.
Mr. Moore,
I'll do my best, yeah.
all right, Mr. Foot, Councilor Foot, Councilor Sunday, to Mr. Robert, and Councilor Weir.
What's the date and time exactly again?
October 23rd, and
6 o'clock, was it?
Same time. Yeah,
Yeah.
same time to me. Okay.
all right.
As long as I don't, it's 100 degrees again. Good timing, I say, good time.
All right, so, Mr. Moore is planning on being sick again, but the rest of us, I believe, agree that will show up.
Week before, everyone's free to stop by and coffee cup.
All right, how many do we need? If everyone else agreed, do I have to agree too?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll agree as well.
Location.
Location,
Okay, so give me space.
We hope,
Huh?
we hope,
Where do you go?
pencil lead.
you got plans for it?
Who do I gotta kick out?
I don't know, I'll check tomorrow.
Yes.
We'll make it.
All the gators are going to turn our PAC session.
Yeah, actually, Chris, can you send along your credit card number? Just read it off. Karen's gonna write it down.
Yeah, no problem. Didn't I already give that to you?
Not yet, just put a picture
No.
of it. That's perfectly safe. Like, working in bank, trust.
Yeah.
I keep saying, trust me, believe me.
I'll believe you, trust me, yeah, either one works.
This is triangle rewards card.
When are we, setting this up for everybody to know about it?
Do we have an approximate date when the information be made public for the meeting?
It is a month away.
It's like 2 weeks. Saying that on the website.
2 weeks, okay, two weeks before. Okay.
If you get it out too early, people will forget. Right? That's the.
And where is that going to appear?
That will appear on our website. I believe we should be able to send out an alertable notification to everyone as well. Leslie, we like to put that on social media or at least reference it on social media.
And we're also, we discussed about, I guess, targeting in regular, but, sending invitations to the business.
Just the commercial.
All the commercial, entities within the town so that they're fully aware of it and they can send somebody, we send somebody. Especially the pines, we'd like to have, then maybe we might be able to get a little handle on what it is that they're actually thinking about doing, because I think that if we know and can make allowances for what they may want to do in our changes is better than waiting until we're ready to go, come with an actual proposal and we can't do this because that's something that we envisioned in the strategy and that stuff. So I guess from my notes of what Chris and I talked about last week, there I believe it was talked about a land use survey. And Chris and I guess we planned to actually do a land use survey. Primarily, that will be Chris with doing a lot of the legwork and Norm, our IT guy, doing the mapping portion of it. That correct, Chris?
Yep.
Just we will be doing that as part of the review.
Okay. effectively that covers step 1 to in the health board. We do have a SOC program on there. Is there any update to that? I know we brought it forward from the previous meeting. We're going to take that and push it forward to
Next,
the next meeting.
might be the next one after that. We haven't had a chance to connect with Chris.
Okay. Well, obviously this is probably priority, so we'll move that until maybe an October meeting. Or that's what I meant. Yeah, whatever months after the one after this one. All right. Now we do have a date for our next meeting in October, which is actually going to be used for our public session. While everyone's here, can we set a date for the November meeting? Do we officially have one set for November? Just check. It's from last time. It's not on the agenda that I'm. I think I've just got an October one that's listed here in the minutes.
Yeah, so
Don't have anything for October. Or November.
Okay. All right.
I
So
thought,
for November, would you guys like to do?
Let's give that the 11th.
but as a committee as a whole,
Yeah.
Person
Yeah,
probably
and-
want time to do the report.
Yeah. It might be better to look at the 18th. That's the Tuesday after our committee of the whole.
I'm good for that.
And that would give a little bit of time for Chris and Tom to look at everything and also then during the NSF meeting.
Yeah.
Does that work for everyone?
Back meeting at 6.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll be 6 o'clock. All right, well, it's 7:48. We have 0 people sitting here with us. So does anyone who's sitting here want to ask any questions relating to the business that we discussed today?
Just back to advertising, will the water bill be going out in the meantime?
No.
This thing? The public meeting and that.
I think we could get that to that would be a question. that we can do that first.
Flash! Oh my God!
Okay. Councillor Weir.
Is anybody else got anything else to say? I just want to ask something from last night very quick. I know it's the end of the summer, so when we go back, Chris,
Oh,
because it's like next month. All right, yeah.
I'm wearing a shirt and tie.
So wait,
What are you saying?
Yeah, I forget that every month anyway. All right, well, hearing no questions from the public gallery, and if there's nothing else to discuss from the committee, 10 minutes early, can I get a motion for adjournment? So moved by Mr. Moore and seconded by Mr. Halliburton, and all in favor?